Hi, welcome. Enjoy the content, subscribe, and turn on notifications.
Christopher had always believed he knew Sarah completely. 8 years of marriage built that kind of certainty, that feeling that there were no secrets between them. He woke up early every day, went to work, and came home to find her waiting with dinner ready and a smile on her face. The routine was comfortable, predictable, safe. Sarah took care of the house, worked part-time at a local office, and on weekends they watched movies together on the couch, sharing popcorn and plans for the future. It was an ordinary life, but it was theirs, and Christopher was content. He'd never had reason to question Sarah's loyalty, never felt that tightness in his chest that comes with suspicion. She was his wife, his partner, the person he trusted most in the world. Until that Thursday afternoon. Christopher had left work early because he had a headache. He got home around 3 in the afternoon, made himself some coffee, and was sitting in the living room when the doorbell rang. He wasn't expecting anyone. When he opened the door, he found a middle-aged man with gray hair wearing an apron that had the logo of a local convenience store. The man looked nervous, shifting his weight from one foot to the other and avoiding direct eye contact. Christopher recognized him vaguely, probably from stopping by the store to pick up something quick. The man introduced himself as Dave, the owner of the convenience store on Main Street, and asked to come in. He said he needed to talk about something delicate, something involving Sarah. Christopher's heart immediately started racing. His mind began racing through possibilities, none of them good. Accident? Illness? He led Dave into the living room, and they sat in chairs opposite each other. Dave let out a deep sigh, pulled a tablet from the backpack he was carrying, and began to explain. He said that over the past few months, he'd noticed inventory losses at the store, small items disappearing from shelves without any record of sale. At first, he'd thought it was a clerical error, later, he suspected dishonest employees. He decided to review the security camera footage to identify the problem. That's when he saw something he never expected. Dave turned the tablet toward Christopher and pressed play. The footage was in black and white, typical of security cameras, but the quality was clear enough. Christopher saw Sarah walking into the convenience store, wearing a coat he recognized, a bag slung over her shoulder. She moved calmly down the aisles, looking at products and picking up a few items. So far, nothing unusual. But then, in a movement that looked rehearsed, she grabbed a lipstick, quickly glanced around, and slipped the product into her bag. She kept walking. She picked up a chocolate bar and hid it in her coat pocket. Another item, a cheap bracelet, also disappeared into her bag. Christopher felt his blood run cold as he watched. His wife was stealing. Sarah, the woman he shared his life with, was committing petty theft as if it were the most natural thing in the world. Dave didn't say a word, he just let the video keep playing. There were more scenes, other dates marked in the corner of the screen. Sarah returned to the store repeatedly, always the same pattern, always taking small items and walking out without paying. Christopher wanted to scream, wanted to close his eyes, but he couldn't look away. His mind tried to process it, tried to find a rational explanation. A kleptomaniac? He'd heard about that, people who steal on impulse, not out of need. But Sarah had never shown any signs of that. Or had she, and he just hadn't noticed. Then Dave switched to another video, this one from the store's exterior parking lot cameras. Christopher saw Sarah coming out of the convenience store, walking quickly toward a dark sedan parked a few feet away, a car he didn't recognize. A man was behind the wheel. Sarah opened the passenger door and got in. For a moment, Christopher thought maybe she'd just gotten a ride from someone, a friend, maybe a coworker. But then he saw it. The two leaned toward each other and kissed. It wasn't a casual kiss. It wasn't a friendly greeting. It was an intense, lingering, passionate kiss. Sarah's hands went to the man's face, his fingers tangled in her hair. They kissed like lovers, like people who had done this many times before. Christopher felt as though he'd been punched in the gut. The air left his lungs. He sat there, paralyzed, watching footage that destroyed everything he'd believed in. Sarah wasn't just stealing, she was cheating on him. 2 crimes, 2 betrayals, unfolding simultaneously on the tablet screen. Dave paused the video, giving Christopher time to absorb the impact. The silence in the room was deafening. Christopher could hear his own heart pounding violently in his chest, blood rushing in his ears. His mind went blank, unable to form coherent thoughts. He looked at Dave, who averted his gaze, clearly uncomfortable. Dave explained that he didn't want to involve the police, he didn't want to ruin anyone's life over low-value items. But he felt Christopher deserved to know the truth. He connected the tablet to Christopher's laptop and transferred copies of all the videos. He said the decision about what to do next was Christopher's. He gave Christopher's shoulder a brief, silent squeeze of solidarity and walked out the door, leaving Christopher alone with the devastating truth he'd just uncovered. Christopher sat in the living room for what felt like hours, though it was probably only minutes. He watched the videos again. And again. Each replay confirmed what he didn't want to believe. Sarah stealing. Sarah kissing another man. Sarah living a secret life he'd never suspected. He tried to recall if there had been signs, clues he'd missed. Had she changed lately? Been more distant? More attentive? He combed through memories from the past few months, but nothing stood out. Sarah had seemed the same as always, or at least she'd done an excellent job pretending. But clearly, he hadn't truly known her at all. Anger began to rise inside him, replacing the initial shock. It was a cold, calculated anger that settled in his chest like a heavy stone. Christopher wasn't a violent man, he'd never been aggressive, but right then, he felt a fury unlike anything he'd ever experienced. It wasn't just the romantic betrayal, though that alone would have been enough to destroy any marriage. It was the sheer duplicity, the daily lie she'd lived, the fact that Sarah looked him in the eyes every night while hiding not one but 2 horrifying secrets. She was a thief and an adulterer. And he'd been a blind fool. Christopher glanced at the clock. It was 4:30 p.m. Sarah usually got home around 6. He had an hour and a half to decide how to handle this. For a brief moment, he considered calling her, confronting her over the phone, demanding immediate explanations. But no, that would be cowardly. It would give her time to invent excuses, to craft lies. He wanted to see her face when he confronted her with the truth. He wanted to see her raw reaction, with no time to build defenses. He decided to wait. He'd wait for her to come home, wait for the right moment, and then throw it all in her face. The next few hours passed in slow motion. Christopher went upstairs to the bedroom, grabbed his laptop, and reconnected the videos Dave had left him. He organized everything, making sure it was ready to show her. He sat on the bed, trying to take deep breaths, trying to control the storm of emotions threatening to explode. He mentally rehearsed what he'd say, how he'd start the conversation, but every scenario he imagined felt inadequate. There were no right words for a moment like this. All that remained was raw truth and the pain that would come with it. When he finally heard the key turn in the front door, Christopher felt his entire body tense up. He heard Sarah's voice calling his name, cheerful as always when she came home. "Chris? You in here? Left work early?" He didn't answer. He listened as her footsteps climbed the stairs, the familiar sound that usually brought comfort but now only brought bitterness. Sarah appeared in the bedroom doorway, smiling, carrying shopping bags. "Hey, sweetie. Can't believe you're already home. Everything okay? Not feeling sick?" She leaned in to kiss him, but Christopher subtly turned his head, just enough to avoid it. Sarah didn't seem to notice. She put the bags on the floor and said she'd take a quick shower before making dinner. Christopher just nodded, unable to trust his own voice at that moment. He watched her grab clean clothes, walk into the bathroom, and closed the door. He heard the shower water start running. Those minutes of waiting were torture. Christopher sat on the bed, laptop open with the videos paused, waiting for the moment of truth. His mind was strangely calm now, the initial rage had shifted into something more controlled, colder. He knew what he had to do. 15 minutes later, the water stopped. Christopher heard the familiar sounds of Sarah drying off, getting dressed. His heart pounded, but his expression stayed steady. The bathroom door opened, and Sarah stepped out wrapped in a fluffy towel, wet hair falling over her shoulders, droplets of water still trickling down her skin. She was humming softly, completely at ease, utterly unaware of what was about to happen. When her eyes met Christopher's, she smiled, an innocent, warm smile, the kind she always gave him when she saw him waiting. But then she noticed the laptop. Noticed his expression. The smile slowly faded, replaced by confusion. Christopher stared at her for a long moment, letting the silence stretch between them, letting the tension build. Finally, in a calm voice heavy with restrained emotion, he asked the question that would change everything, "Do you have something to confess?" Sarah froze, completely. Her whole body stiffened, eyes wide and locked on Christopher, breath caught in her chest. She didn't move, didn't even blink, as if she'd turned to stone. Christopher saw the exact moment panic took over, saw the blood drain from her face, saw her hands start to tremble faintly. What do you mean?" she finally whispered, but her voice wavered, betraying her nerves. Christopher slowly turned the laptop toward her. The screen showed a frozen image of her inside the convenience store, hand reaching toward a shelf. "I mean," he began, his voice dangerously calm, "that the store owner came by today. Brought some interesting videos I think you should see." He pressed play. Sarah took an involuntary step back, as if physically shoved. Her eyes glued to the screen, watching herself steal, hide items in her bag, walk out of the store without paying. "Chris, I can explain," she started, but her voice died as the video switched to the exterior footage. When she saw herself getting into the car, when she saw the kiss, Sarah let out a choked sound, somewhere between a sob and a whimper. Her legs seemed to give out, and she leaned against the wall, the towel slipping slightly, though she didn't notice. Tears began streaming down her face, mixing with the water droplets still on her skin. "Chris, please, let me explain. Please." Christopher felt icy fury course through his veins, but he kept control. He didn't shout, didn't punch walls, didn't explode. Instead, his voice came out low and sharp as a blade. "Explain what, Sarah? Explain that you're a thief? Explain that you've been cheating on me? Explain how many times you've done this, how many times you've stolen, walked out of that store, and gone to meet him." He spat the last word with contempt. "Who is he? How long has this been going on?" Sarah slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, sobbing uncontrollably. "I didn't want it to be like this. I have a problem, Chris. I can't control it. The stealing, it's a compulsion. I need help." Christopher let out a bitter, humorless laugh. "A compulsion? You want me to believe it's just an illness? And the guy in the car, Sarah, is he a compulsion too? Do you compulsively shove your tongue down strangers' throats?" "He's not a stranger," Sarah admitted between sobs, and those words cut like another knife. "It's Matthew. You've met him, we've seen him at events. He started as a friend, someone I could talk to. I was feeling so alone, Chris. You work so much, you're always tired, and I needed attention, I needed someone who saw me." Christopher stood up from the bed, unable to stay seated. "So it's my fault? You're cheating on me and stealing because I work too much? Because I don't give you enough attention?" His voice finally rose, anger seeping through the cracks in his control. "No. That's not it. I'm not blaming you, I'm trying to explain. Matthew, he understood me. He made me feel special. And the stealing, it started small, just once, and then I couldn't stop. The adrenaline, the thrill, it all got mixed up with Matthew, and I didn't know how to get out. Sarah was crying so hard she could barely speak. I love you, Chris. I still love you. It was a mistake, a terrible, terrible mistake. Christopher looked at her, the woman he'd loved for 8 years, now a crumpled heap of desperation and regret on their bedroom floor. He felt many things in that moment, anger, betrayal, sadness, loss, but surprisingly, he also felt a cold clarity. Do you love Matthew? He asked bluntly. Sarah hesitated, and that hesitation was answer enough. I don't know. I thought I did, but now, seeing you, seeing what I've done to us, I don't know anything anymore. How long? Christopher pressed, his voice hard. How long have you been sleeping with him? How long have you been lying to my face every single day? Sarah closed her eyes, tears still falling. 4 months. It started 4 months ago. 4 months. 120 days of lies. 120 nights when she came home and slept beside him as if nothing were wrong. Christopher felt nauseated. And the stealing? Sarah opened her eyes, confused by the question. Around the same time, I guess. I can't explain the connection, but it all seemed to start together. Christopher moved away from her, walking to the window and staring out without really seeing anything. His mind was processing everything, sorting facts, planning his next steps. You're leaving this house, he said finally, his voice devoid of emotion. Tonight. You'll pack your things and go. I don't want you here. I can't even look at you right now. Sarah crawled toward him, still on her knees, grabbing the hem of his pants. Please, Chris, don't do this. Give me a chance. I can get help, go to therapy, fix this. Please, don't just abandon me like this. He pulled away from her touch as if it burned. You think I'm going to give you a chance? You think that after all this, after stealing, cheating, lying to me for months, I'm just going to forgive you and move on? You destroyed me, Sarah. You destroyed everything we built. He finally looked at her, his eyes cold and distant. I'm giving you 1 hour to pack your things. After that, I want you out of here. And tomorrow morning, I'm calling a lawyer. Sarah kept pleading, promising change, promising she'd be different, but Christopher had already shut down emotionally. He walked downstairs, grabbed his car keys, and left the house, unable to stay another second. He drove without direction, the city's dark streets blurring past as his mind tried to process the total collapse of his life. When he returned 2 hours later, Sarah was gone. She'd left her key on the kitchen table, along with a letter that Christopher threw in the trash unread. He didn't want her excuses or explanations. He'd already seen everything he needed to see. In the days that followed, Christopher moved on autopilot. He hired a divorce lawyer who assured him the process would be swift, especially with evidence of infidelity. Christopher handed over the videos Dave had provided. His lawyer said this would solidify his case, ensuring Sarah wouldn't be entitled to much of anything. Christopher also learned more about Matthew. He was married, with 2 young daughters. In a moment of controlled rage, Christopher sent the videos to Matthew's wife as well. If he was suffering, everyone involved would face consequences. Sarah tried contacting him repeatedly, calls, texts, emails, all begging for a conversation, a chance to explain better, to redeem herself. Christopher blocked every form of communication. He had nothing to say to her. The betrayal, combined with the theft, had killed any lingering feelings he might have had. Mutual friends tried to intervene, saying Sarah was devastated, in therapy now, that she recognized her mistakes. Christopher didn't care. He'd moved past anger into cold indifference. Dave, the convenience store owner, initially said he wouldn't press charges, but when other local shop owners heard about the situation and realized she'd stolen from their stores too, they joined together in a class action lawsuit. Sarah faced criminal charges from multiple businesses. Christopher heard through others that she'd agreed to a plea deal involving restitution, community service, and mandatory psychological treatment. Her reputation in the community was ruined. People who once greeted her now avoided her. She'd become the cheating thief, the town scandal. Matthew also suffered severe consequences. His wife filed for divorce immediately, taking the kids and leaving him in an empty apartment. He lost his job when the story spread through his office. The last Christopher heard, Matthew had left town, unable to face the public shame. Christopher felt no satisfaction in Matthew's downfall. In fact, he felt nothing. The revenge he thought he wanted brought no relief, only a persistent emptiness. The divorce was finalized within 6 months. Christopher kept the house, the cars, most of their shared assets. Sarah didn't contest anything, likely because she knew she had no legal ground to stand on. On the day the final papers were signed, Christopher felt a mix of relief and melancholy. He was free, but he was also alone. 8 years of his life had been built on a lie, and now he had to rebuild from scratch. 9 months after that fateful afternoon when Dave rang his doorbell, Christopher was at a coffee shop when he saw Sarah for the first time since their confrontation. She was alone, sitting in a corner, absently scrolling through her phone. She looked smaller somehow, more fragile, as if the weight of her choices had physically diminished her presence. Their eyes met briefly. Sarah opened her mouth as if to speak, but Christopher simply turned and walked out. He had nothing to say to her. That chapter of his life was closed. Christopher eventually began to rebuild. He moved to another part of town, started going to the gym, reconnected with friends he'd neglected during his marriage. He even started dating casually, though trust didn't come easily. Every new relationship was haunted by the shadow of what Sarah had done. He caught himself checking phones, looking for signs of betrayal where there were none. It was a slow process, learning to trust again, learning to believe that not everyone lies. Sarah, on the other hand, bore the scars of her choices far more visibly. Christopher heard through mutual acquaintances that she'd lost her job due to the criminal charges. She was living with her sister, doing temporary work, trying to rebuild a life she'd destroyed herself. Her kleptomania was under control through intensive therapy and medication, but her ruined reputation and broken relationships couldn't be easily fixed. Matthew had vanished completely from her life, cutting off all contact after the scandal. She was alone, dealing with the consequences of 4 months of terrible decisions that had cost her everything. 2 years after the confrontation, Christopher was genuinely okay. He'd found peace, not in forgiveness, but in acceptance. He accepted that people lie, that not all love is true, that trust is fragile and can be shattered in seconds. He learned that knowing someone for years doesn't mean truly knowing them, that secrets can hide even in the most intimate relationships. Most importantly, he learned that surviving betrayal doesn't mean fully getting over it, it means learning to live with the scars. He never spoke to Sarah again. He never felt the need for closure, for one last talk, for answers to questions that no longer mattered. That night when she stepped out of the shower and froze at his question, that was the end of everything. The marriage, the trust, the future they'd planned together, all ended in that moment. And though Christopher carried the pain of that betrayal, he also carried the strength of having faced the truth head-on, of refusing to live in denial. Years later, when Christopher finally found someone he could trust again, someone who slowly rebuilt his faith in love, he sometimes thought back to that afternoon when Dave showed up at his door. He thought about how a simple decision to review security footage had revealed truths that forever changed multiple lives. He thought about Sarah, about Matthew, about all the lives ruined by selfish choices and uncontrollable impulses. But mostly, he thought about himself, the man he'd been before that discovery, and the man he'd become afterward. The betrayal had broken something inside him, but it had also forged something stronger. He'd learned to value honesty above all else, to recognize his own worth, to never settle for less than he deserved. And when his new partner occasionally asked about his previous marriage, Christopher simply said it hadn't worked out, that people change, that it just didn't work. He didn't share the sordid details or reopen old wounds. That story belonged to the past, and Christopher was firmly focused on the present, building a future on stronger foundations, on real trust, on honest love. The question he'd asked Sarah that night, "Do you have something to confess?" had changed everything. And though the answer had destroyed his marriage, it had also freed him from a life built on lies. In the end, as painful as it was the best thing that could have happened. Thank you for watching the video. If you enjoyed it, don't forget to subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications so you won't miss any updates. See you next time.